So today I'll be talking about Faking It by Lux Alptrum, which apparently means light nightmare or something. I'm not sure. James told me. So he doesn't think it's her real name. I don't care either way. It's an interesting name. So I read that this morning. And let's see, we watched, I'm going to talk about Legion a little bit before this, before the book, because I remembered something that I forgot to talk about, because I often do that. I'll make note of something and I'll think, I'll get back to it, and I don't. Well, now remember I'd mentioned the one character in David's mind that's a little boy, and it's, well, it's not really, he has like, he has himself as the little boy David, but then there's this, the angriest boy in the world, little boy, that's, he's basically, in this story, little young David is being told a bedtime story by his father, and it's the angriest boy in the world. And, the little boy in the story is a very angry little boy. He ends up cutting his mother's head off. And the thing is although you know that David has a very loving sister in this story, we don't know anything about his natural born parents, who they were, and we don't know anything about his adopted parents. Where are they? What happened to them? All we know is that he has this loving sister, but we don't ever see images of his natural born parents. And David was commenting that why couldn't he see the face of his dad? And we were kind of trying to look, and it looked like David, it sounded like David, just the older version of David. We don't know who his father is, his adopted father. And we don't know who his natural father is. I mean, you have this sort of assumption that, what's his name? Oliver and Melanie, they seem like parents. They're parent figures. You know, they'd be about 30 years older than David and Sid. You have this idea they're parent figures. And, even like with the two Carries, the male Carrie and the female Carrie, they're really codependent sort of characters, right? When they're in the astral plane, where they're in the imaginary psych ward kind of situation, they're walking side by side, and they're in separate rooms, they sleep in separate rooms, but they can see each other through a sort of glass block kind of window, you know, so they do have privacy, but they can see each other's shapes, and they can knock on the wall to communicate. So they're right there. Their heads are basically almost touching. There's just a little wall in between them, but the heads of their beds are touching, right? So they're touching all the time, and it's like the Carrie girl is sort of like a daughter figure to the Carrie man, who's the scientist, and he's able to do all sorts of things, but she protects him. So she's sort of like a parent figure to him in a way too, right? He's older because she doesn't age unless she's outside of his body, and she only comes out to protect him. So she's younger, she looks like a daughter, so he looks like the parent figure, but she's the one who protects him, so she's like the parent figure, sort of, right? So there's all of these interesting things about this story. It's really worth watching. I'll end up writing about it in depth later, but it's going to take me a long time, so whatever. Now, these other ones we watched, this one's just terrible. I don't know why I keep borrowing this from the library for James. Letterkenny Season 5. And I don't know why they keep making it. Honestly, is it like, it says it's Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. So what are they're funding this, so they just keep making it because they're able to get grants? I'm not sure. It's so bad. the fantasy makers, Tolkien, Lewis, and MacDonald. And I've never read MacDonald's stuff. Apparently it's about fairies and stuff. But I actually don't like Tolkien. I've read a lot of C.S. Lewis, which I love. But anyway, you know what? I'm going to have to write a thing about Tolkien later, because to explain why I don't like him, because it's anyway. So this managed to make fantasy writers boring. The best, you know. Most people would say Tolkien. They'd say he's the best. I don't think so, but they managed to make them boring. So this is a terrible documentary. I mean, there was really nothing to offer. It was only 88 minutes long, but it felt like hours. Creed 2, well, nobody expects this to be good, so Green Book. Now, Viggo Mortensen did an awesome job. I would have sworn, and James was sure he could kind of recognize him, but he thought he was maybe some actor, you know, that some Italian guy who gets Italian roles in movies, because there's always there's a lot of Italian roles in movies. But anyway, so when I said who it was, he was like, wow, you know, because he does that awesome a job. And he gained a fair amount of weight for this show. Yeah, I think just to do the show, honestly. But I don't know. But wow, I expected this to suck, and I was like, it's a little long. What was it? 2 hours, 10 minutes. So I was thinking, oh, this is going to be so boring. 1962, and like about a pianist who goes into the deep south to play concerts. Anyway, and I thought, oh my gosh, is this ever going to drag? But we were both really into it. So both James and I give this a thumbs up. This was worth watching. So there you go. Now I'm going to talk about that, because this book is worth reading, and I didn't expect it to be. I picked this book. I put things on hold when I see them, and and I saw this and I thought, okay, you know, how hard can it be to get through? So anyway, page 2. The typical read on fake orgasms is a simple one. Women fake because they're having subpar sex and want to get it over with. 3. Mid-20th century sexologists William Masters and Virginia Johnson attempted to map out the typical female sexual response cycle, and it describes the physical experience of some women. 4. Doctors use their models to diagnose sexual disorders. The 4-stage model makes broad assumptions about the similarities between male and female sexual response, focused primarily on women who were able to orgasm during penis and vagina intercourse. 37. Porn consumption is still highly stigmatized. Sure, we all know everyone looks at it, but if you're actually devoting time to finding exactly the video you want, or doing a deep dive into the overwhelming abundance of porn genres, there's a lingering assumption that there might be something wrong with you. Now, I'm going to tell you, no, not everyone looks at it. I don't look at porn. Sometimes I unwillingly look at porn because I borrow something from the public library, honestly. I reported on it the other day, and if you've seen that, you know what I'm talking about. So that's, no, not everyone looks at porn. I was not raised to be interested in that sort of thing, and I am not. So, and in this, I mean, it might have something to do with, like, she mentions how some women are able to orgasm just by mental concentration, and I can. So it might have something to do with that. I'm one of those lucky people. I think everyone could do it if they really worked at it. So get to it. What do you have to lose? A little bit of time concentrating on pleasant things. 46. 30% of women can orgasm from vaginal intercourse. And I'm like, wow, only 30% have figured out how. You know, that's sad. So that's my reading of it anyway. 47. STI, sexually transmitted infection education. Now, that's where they were commenting on that a little bit, page 47. Now, I have a problem with that the sexually transmitted diseases are now called infections. Infection implies temporary. If it cannot be cured, it's a disease and needs to be referred to as such. Also, venereal disease should have worked out just fine for people. If the population's too stupid to know what venereal means, we shouldn't change the term, we should educate the population. So that's my opinion on that. 64. If you believe that the hymen must be vanquished before sex can be enjoyed, you believe that a woman must experience pain and bleeding, even if it's brought on by a tampon or a rough horseback ride. Which I read that and I'm like, I just laughed out loud, and so I had to explain to James was in the room while I was reading, so I explained to him what I'd laughed about, and I really don't think a rough horseback ride could rupture your hymen. That's a seriously rough ride. Before she can experience sexual pleasure. Anyway, if you believe that a woman must experience pain and bleeding during sex, you've both normalized and created the expectation of painful first-time sex, leading women to believe that the discomfort or distress they feel during penis and vagina intercourse is not merely normal, but necessary, and that if it doesn't hurt or result in blood, they're somehow doing it wrong. 93. Tia Williams pulls no punches when I asked her for her take on the no makeup trend. So they were talking about men who ask their women or not to wear makeup or comment on women's makeup or whatever. I guess it's a common thing now. And I know, for example, my ex-boyfriend, he didn't want me to wear makeup. He would, he didn't want me to have hair. He honestly tried to convince me to shave my head bald on numerous occasions because he said that he found bald women more attractive. Okay, I will comment on that later. Back to the book. I think it's anti-woman, she says. This is Tia Williams. Though encouraging women to embrace their unmodified appearance has the potential to be a radical movement to encourage self-love and personal choice, that's not the result we've ended up with. 96. All femininity is, to some degree, a kind of drag. We're just more likely to call it out when the person performing it was assigned male at birth. I love that quote. 116. Trans dating advice that went viral. A blog post from pickup coach The Modern Man titled, How to Talk to a Woman Wearing Headphones. Girls put on headphones distinctly to avoid talking to people. Tran says that women do appreciate a confident man who sweeps her off her feet. Lux says, of course women might make an exception for a truly magical experience, for a man who's really truly worth it. But if every man convinces himself that he's the exception, the one for whom it's okay to talk to a woman with headphones on, to ignore a woman's profession of disinterest, the exception ceases to be exceptional. 119. Jessica Valenti, founder of feminist blog Feministing, says if you don't even have an example of a female voice talking about what women want, then the only one that exists is the male one. So of course men listen to it and believe it. 120. By reinforcing the narrative of feminine passivity and masculine aggression, we help train men to see their desire, and not a woman's consent, as the ultimate arbiter of any potential romantic or sexual situation. 123. Thoughts return to trans insistent that women want to be swept off their feet, that any intrusion can ultimately be consensual so long as it's done correctly. When you exist in a world where the greatest compliment that can be paid to women is male attention, then it's easy to believe that the only problem is approaching women incorrectly or approaching women who are already taken, and not that aggressively, relentlessly approaching women might be the issue in and of itself. 124. Bella Vendetta, a stripper based in Western Massachusetts, she can't even go out for a drink with her girlfriend without being harassed by men. Her girlfriend tells people I'm gay, assuming that her queerness will deflect any further sexual attention. And, quote again, it never does, Vendetta says. They spend the rest of the night trying to convince her that she's not gay and that she just needs a man. 132. Autumn tells me a reoccurring trend among the men she pursues. They're interested in me only if they think that they're the first time that I've done anything, she says, noting that she routinely downplays her sexual experience, reducing her partner count of 9 to just 1 or 2, denying that she's engaged in anything but the most vanilla sex acts. When she doesn't, men think I've had so much sex that they don't have to be attached to me. They can see it as a fling and not have to worry about me or how I feel about it. 132. It is perhaps an update on the virgin-whore dichotomy, one in which women are somehow expected to inhabit both states at the exact same time. Sexual knowledge through magic, not experience. 147. Brian Moylan's one-dick rule. The penis is so powerful, so magical, that even the briefest exposure to it renders one forever changed. A man who's touched another penis is absolutely, definitely gay, no matter how many women he's been with in his life. A woman who's been with one man is forever marked by him. 162. Schwartz. Throughout history, men have sought to diminish the role that women play in the work performed by their own bodies, reducing women to vessels, to incubators, merely here to sustain and feed and support the life of which men have routinely portrayed themselves as the sole authors and creators. This is the notion of the homunculus, a fully realized miniature human that a man ejaculates into a woman's womb. And it's that sense of ownership of the reproductive process that likely leads men to insert themselves into the very personal decisions women make about the state and status of their bodies, that leads many men to take aggressive and sometimes deceptive action to maintain control of whether, how, and when women do and do not get pregnant. 163. Men who try to control their partner's reproductive choices aren't just bad boyfriends or guys doing their best to gain a little control over their own reproductive future. They're abusers, ones whom women often have to go to complicated and sometimes deceptive lengths to protect themselves from, says Bianca Palmisano, a sex educator and medical consultant who trains physicians to recognize the signs of sexual violence. Media depictions of relationship abuse tend to play up the physical violence aspects, bruises, black eyes, etc. 164. Physical intimidation is a way of keeping a partner submissive, in line, and under one's control. There are other tactics to wield controls: humiliating and belittling a partner, exerting total control over their finances, using the legal system to harass them through repeated lawsuits. Reproductive coercion is particularly effective. Once someone has impregnated you, it's significantly harder to end the relationship. Even if you walk out, you're permanently bonded to them through shared offspring. Offspring which your abuser may legally have a right to spend time with. Depending on one's situation, separating from your abuser can mean losing access to your children or other family members, suffering shame and stigma within your community, being subjected to online harassment and public humiliation, and in the most extreme cases, even death. 184. Kate Harding, author of Asking for It, The Alarming Rise of Rape Culture and What We Can Do About It. So I just made note of that. I don't have anything that I wrote down from her book. 190. Persistent genital arousal disorder. Body displays physical signs of arousal for hours, days, or even endlessly, regardless of whether or not anything sexy is going on. 191. Kara Anaya has PGAD and can experience upwards of 180 orgasms in a few hours. And apparently she's not very happy about it. She finds it embarrassing and she can't have a normal life because of it. So 4 to 5% of rape survivors report experience orgasm during rape. The rape survivors see it as an act of betrayal that undermines the trauma of their experience. 197. Education about puberty. Boys, you're going to get erection, nocturnal emissions. Girls, you're going to start menstruating. Pleasure is endemic to our narrative of male sexual development. For women, it's treated as wholly separate from the main event of reproduction. Harding says, the idea that men are supposed to keep pushing past the woman's no is still very much there, even though we supposedly know better now. 198, feminist blog, bab.net, published January 2018, an account of a date with Aziz Ansari, who acts like a, quote, horny, rough, entitled 18-year-old, who interprets no as try again in a little bit. 199, Charlotte Shane, Essay for Matter, 2015. Being straight is a constant exercise in degradation. It's always easier to ask for forgiveness than to get permission. 207. Lies are strategic. Whether they are faking their orgasms or inventing boyfriends or concealing their past, women lie for specific reasons, or concealing their ones that are often deeply connected to their very survival. Women lie because society won't accept their truth, and they lie because their truth puts them at risk. They lie because sometimes a socially approved falsehood is the only reasonable way forward. Women lie because sometimes a lie is the only way to express a deeper truth. 213. Far more often, the lie about sex is one intended to eschew rather than invite attention. Women fake an orgasm to put a stop to someone's badgering. They invent a boyfriend to dissuade a would-be suitor. They feign sexual purity to reinforce the strength of their relationship. Even lies about sexual assault are, in most cases, lies intended to evade punishment, not to bring it on in the form of endless online harassment. 218. There's no question that women cannot be safe unless they are believed, and women will always lie so long as it's the one thing that ensures their safety. There's a lot of good quotes in this, and you might have noticed. I was really surprised by this woman. She writes for New York Times, Cosmopolitan, and Hustler. So, I mean, you could see a lot of her connections. She would refer to friends who were porn stars and stuff like that, probably, because she got to know them through working for Hustler and stuff. Now, I will comment on a few things that I didn't agree with in her book. Now, when she was talking about how with women's reproductive rights and that connection that is formed as soon as a man impregnates a woman, and then the woman she has this forced relationship with this guy even if she leaves, because then he is able to see his children or whatever. Now, that goes both ways. If a man convinces a woman not to have children when she desperately wants them, and it has lasting consequences. And with my sister had children with her ex, and her ex was awful. And there was that, he was constantly there, and finally she married somebody else, I think, just so that he would leave her alone. Honestly, I don't know what the answer is, but her answer in this book is get an IUD, basically, or, take birth control into your own hands. And it's funny, because you should be able to learn from the past and look at when there was the big sexual revolution and women thought, oh yeah, there's going to be free love and stuff because now we have control over our reproductive rights, to not get pregnant all of a sudden. And it ended up that it wasn't free love for the women, really. It was free love for the men. They didn't have responsibility of having children, because most men don't want to have children. They just don't. So, anyway. So this really rewarded men a lot. And I know from my own experience, it was always my responsibility to make sure that I didn't get pregnant, even though I wanted to have children. So how messed up is that? So I would be buying the birth control and and I wasn't allowed to reproduce. So anyway, no, I mean, there's another answer. You don't have to actually have physical contact with somebody else to enjoy sex. In fact, men get really experienced with their what they enjoy with taking matters into their own hands, and women need to do the same. It's plain and simple. You know, you'll often hear about men having a circle jerk or whatever with guy friends, and women don't do that. It doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, why can't you have a big orgy of people and you're just all mastering your own sexual needs? And nobody needs to touch. There's no worry about sexually transmitted diseases, infections, or venereal diseases when nobody's coming into contact with each other, and everybody's responsible for their own orgasms. And that's when you really have a mastery of your own reproductive system, really. So anyway, that's my opinion on that. And it's definitely a book worth reading, to my surprise. So